Are bracing for possible protests during this weekend's military parade in our nation's capital.
The so-called No Kings Day protests are being planned nationwide. ABC's Perry Russom has the details.
This morning, tanks and armored vehicles now line some streets in the nation's capital, ready to roll for Saturday's military parade. Sources say mounted rocket launchers will be on display, along with 6,000 soldiers and a 50 aircraft flyover.
Saturday is going to be a big day in Washington, D.C.
Officials insist the parade is solely to mark the Army's 250th birthday, but the timing is hard to ignore. Saturday is also President Trump's 79th birthday. He has a warning for any protesters.
And if there's any protester who wants to come out, they will be met with very big force.
One organizer of No Kings Day, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, now responding to Trump's threat.
Donald Trump is a bully. And this is, and a lot of times what bullies do and what authoritarians do is they create fear because they are hopeful that in the language that they use, they want in the language that they use to basically bully you into submission, into basically being silent.
Trump's push for a military parade may have been inspired abroad. In 2017, he attended France's annual Bastille Day celebrations, later calling it one of the greatest parades he'd ever seen. Perry Russom, ABC News.
Now to L.A., where Marines will be deployed before the end of the week.
Yes, U.S. Northern Command says troops will be on the ground as the city remains a focal point for nationwide protest. L.A. officials say the daytime protests have been calm, but once nightfall arrives, things get different.
Our role is to protect everybody's First Amendment rights, and a lot of people have come out and respected that and expressed their feelings in a peaceful way. Once nightfall comes in particular, we start to see others come out who are intent on violence and intent on disruption.
LA's chief says so far they've not needed help from the National Guard.
And stay with us right here on air and online at KENS5.com. We have continuing coverage on what's unfolding, not just here in San Antonio, but across the nation.
Seeing protests pop up in other cities across the country. ABC's Ika Jachi is joining us now from Foley Park. That's in New York City for more. So first of all, Alex, as you know, we saw hundreds gather to protest, several arrests there in your area. What are you expecting in New York this afternoon, Ike?
Well, we heard from New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, and she gave us a good idea about the scope of these demonstrations. She said that yesterday around 2,500 demonstrators were marching all throughout Lower Manhattan, eventually making their way here to Foley Square. Now, she said that those demonstrations, that protest, was overwhelmingly peaceful. However, after some time, she said there were about 400 of those demonstrators who began to act unruly by throwing bottles, throwing police traffic cones at police officers. Out of those 400 demonstrators, 86 were arrested, 34 were charged with assault, among other charges. Now, we're being told that ICE Out, which is what it's being labeled, that ICE Out protest will continue again here today. We are expecting any number of protesters to, again, make their way down toward Lower Manhattan and coalesce around here in Foley Square. It's hard to determine exactly how many people will make their way here, but it could be anything from hundreds to thousands. At any rate, this city is prepared. Take a look. You can see the guardrails have already been put up here in Foley Square, essentially encompassing this entire area. There is a heavy amount of police officers that are scattered, not only in this area, but on the parks that are in the outskirts of this area, preparing for any number of demonstrations and protesters that make their way here. But again, this is expected to go on for a second day here, right here in Foley Square, Kana.
And that's interesting. It looks like business as usual right now, but as you so rightly pointed out, those barricades are up and ready. Ika Jachi, our thanks to you there.
First of all, we want to make sure that what has happened in California does not happen in Texas. Texas is a law and order state, and we will use every tool that we can to ensure order across our state. That includes the deployment of Texas Department of Public Safety officers, as well as Texas National Guard, in strategic locations where they can provide the most robust response where needed. There is freedom of speech. However, if in your protest you damage somebody's property or you harm an individual, that's violating the law and you will be arrested for it.
Anti-ICE protests are erupting across Texas. Hundreds of protesters gathered for hours in downtown Dallas. They're speaking out against ICE raids happening across the country. Dallas police called the march an unlawful assembly last night and began deploying pepper spray and smoke to clear the crowd. In Austin, there were also large crowds marching and protesting over the weekend. Texas DPS says 4 people were arrested after a protest at the Capitol last night. Tear gas and pepper balls were used to maintain order. An ICE spokesperson sent us a statement about this that reads in part, quote, ICE respects the constitutional right of people to peacefully protest. However, assaulting, resisting, impeding, or harassing ICE officers and special agents or interfering in any way as they're executing their official duty is against the law. If any person assaults a federal law enforcement officer, they risk being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, end quote.
Families away from their communities because you're taking workers away from their cities, and they will not be silent.
Meantime, here in San Antonio, ICE detainments continue outside Immigration Court downtown. Today, a Cuban man says his Bolivian wife and 2 children were detained after an immigration hearing.
We called various times asking them to please tell us what we need to legally do. We entered the country legally. We don't have problems. We are not delinquents. We work and we just want to do this legally so we can become residents.
The family had a preliminary court date for next year, but it was moved suddenly to today. After the hearing, ICE agents took his wife, 11-year-old son, and 1-year-old into custody. He says the toddler is American-born. Now he's vowing to get an attorney and fight for their release. As migrants are detained, St. Mary's University student Raquel Christopherson is doing what she can to inform those entering immigration court of their rights.
My mom had orders of deportation, and she finally was granted her residency last year. And as an adult, I was scared, and I didn't know what was going to happen with my mom's case, because one day we're being told that she has a small chance of staying in the country, and the next day we're told that she has a bigger chance of staying.
Protesters have also taken to the streets across the nation, including Los Angeles, where tensions boiled over last night following a day of peaceful demonstrations.
Now we want to bring you the latest on those escalating tensions in the Middle East. Multiple sources telling CBS News right now that U.S. officials have been warned Israel is fully ready to launch an operation against Iran, raising concerns that Tehran could retaliate on certain U.S. sites in neighboring Iraq. This morning, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad is advising American citizens to not travel to the country, and the State Department has ordered non-emergency U.S. government personnel there to leave Iraq. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News' James Laporta in our Washington bureau. James, we know that Israel has long warned of Iranian threats to its existence. So what is new about what we're learning is part of their assessment now when it comes to this threat?
So what we're learning now is that it seems to be that we are at an impasse regarding negotiations with Iran, between the U.S. and Iran. And for the most part, U.S. has been holding back has been holding back Israel from attacking Iran. But as of yesterday, we here at the Bureau, we started to get indications and warnings that negotiations had reached an impasse. There's supposed to be another round set of talks on Sunday, but that the fear is that if Israel attacks Iran, Iran or its proxies would attack American assets in the region. And this is not speculation. The Iranian defense minister has said that if Iran is forced into a conflict, they would attack American interests.
Now, part of the reason Israel has this view of Iran is they have been attacked by, according to Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Those are Iranian-backed. But as you just mentioned, the U.S. administration is trying to negotiate a nuclear peace agreement with Tehran. So as Israel makes these threats, where do these talks really stand?
So as I said, there is a 6-round scheduled talks on Sunday. But right now, we seem to be at an impasse in terms of negotiations. Iran has said that the U.S. proposal is unacceptable. The U.S. is of the stance that Iran should not be allowed to enrich uranium for their nuclear program, and that's kind of where we're at. And Israel has long believed that Iran has used these talks as a to stall and to continue their aims in terms of enriching uranium. So right now, negotiations have stalled, and that's where we're at right now. But there is there are scheduled talks on Sunday.
James Laporta with the latest details for us from our DC bureau. Thank you for that, James. Let's jump over to the White House now. Natalie Brand is following developments for us there. Good morning to you, Natalie. You know, there's significant intelligence sharing between the U.S. and Israel. So what is the White House saying about these reports that Israel may launch this attack?
Well, I think one very telling sign is the notices that went out to Americans living in the region. Errol, you alluded to it, but some Americans told to leave. That includes the State Department telling non-emergency officials, ordering them to leave the Middle East or leave Iraq due to heightened regional tensions, and the Pentagon telling military families that they can voluntarily leave locations throughout the Middle East. President Trump was asked by reporters about that while attending a show at the Kennedy Center last night. Take a listen to some of what he had to say.
Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But they are being, we've given notice to move out. We'll see what happens.
Is there anything that can be done to dial the temperature down in the region?
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow that.
As you were talking to with James, there is a sixth round of talks scheduled for this weekend between the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and the Iranian side as they try to negotiate a potential nuclear deal here. We know the president has also been speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu. And last month, publicly, President Trump said he urged Netanyahu not to strike Iran while his administration is trying to pursue these negotiations, Errol.
All right, we'll continue to watch all of this closely. Natalie, thank you very much.
President Trump says he plans to phase out FEMA, shifting disaster response to the states after this hurricane season.
We want to wean off of FEMA, and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states so the governors can handle it. That's why they're governors now. If they can't handle it, they shouldn't be governor. But these governors can handle it, and they'll work in conjunction with other governors. They'll give each other a hand.
The president says instead of FEMA, disaster funds will come directly from his office, possibly through Homeland Security.
We're going to give out less money. We're going to give it out directly. It'll be from the president's office. We'll have somebody here. Could be Homeland Security.
The announcement comes as NOAA predicts a strong hurricane season. 10 hurricanes are forecast between now and November. Donald Trump did not give a firm timeline, but told Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to explain what comes next.
We think after this, Kristi, I'd say after the hurricane season, we'll
yes,
start
sir. You set up
out.
a FEMA council over the next couple of months. We'll be working on reforms and what FEMA will look like in the future as a different agency, as under the Department of Homeland Security to the president's vision. And it will empower governors to go out and respond to emergency situations.
Trump and Noem have long called FEMA expensive and ineffective and have favored dismantling it.
The FEMA thing has not been a very successful experiment. Very, very expensive, and it doesn't get the job done. You saw what happened in North Carolina under the past administration.
In the meantime, FEMA is still coordinating for this year's hurricane season. Noem says they're building mutual aid agreements between states so local governments can ramp up response without federal help.
If a certain state, as an example, gets hit by a hurricane or tornado, that's what a governor, a governor should be able to handle it. And frankly, if they can handle it, the aftermath, then maybe they shouldn't be governor.
But there are growing concerns. FEMA faces staffing shortages, expected to lose nearly 30% of its workforce by year's end. Noem has reopened training centers and extended contracts to help fill gaps. State leaders are worried, saying many states do not have the budget or manpower to go it alone. And some of the most reliant on FEMA are Republican-led states that voted for Donald Trump. Florida, Louisiana, and Texas have each received over $2 billion in FEMA aid since 2015, mostly through the Individuals and Households program.
One of the world's most active volcanoes, Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island, began spewing lava from the North Vent Wednesday, the latest event in an ongoing eruption that began almost 6 months ago. Lava fountains reached heights of more than 330 feet or 100 meters and feeding multiple lava streams. Scientists with the U.S. Geological Survey's Hawaiian Volcano Observatory said the fountains were likely to go higher. It is the 25th eruptive episode since the volcano on the southeastern part of the island began erupting December 23rd. It has been pausing and resuming since. Most of the eruptive episodes have spewed lava for about a day or less, with pauses between them generally lasting a few days.
Cochlear implants are one of Australia's greatest innovations of the past century, and Nine News has been given an exclusive look inside the Sydney factory that makes them. It marks the launch of a new generation of smarter implants. A Melbourne man, one of the first recipients.
Stephen Dyte is one of the first in the world to receive Cochlear's newest implants. The moment his device is switched on, the 58-year-old becomes emotional.
There's video of me crying when all the sounds all started coming through. An incredible experience to experience sounds in ways that I'd never heard them before.
For decades, Stephen relied on hearing aids, but he started to struggle.
I was told I probably needed to go down the cochlear path because my hearing was disintegrating rapidly.
The decision has been life-changing.
I can hear television, I can hear people speak in the car.
Stephen received the newest cochlear technology, 10 years in the making.
We can now globally announce and introduce our first smart implants.
It's the first implant with built-in memory, more sophisticated microchips enabling program upgrades without having to change hardware.
It's very similar to your iPhone, for example. We're hoping that in the longer term, some of the research that's been going on can translate to better speech processing strategies and provide better long-term hearing. It's a lot of future capability that's been put into this new system.
The technology has come a long way since it was pioneered in Australia in the 1970s. This manufacturing facility in Lane Cove, one of 6 in the world and Cochlear's largest. The company employs 1,200 staff in Sydney and Brisbane. More than 50,000 of these units are produced in Australia each year. 95% are exported around the world.
Nearly 50 years later, there's still a lot of opportunity for us to innovate and make the technology better.
Gabriella.
En el nombre del Padre y del Hijo.
Estamos en Santa Cecilia. Nosotros estábamos ahí, literalmente. dust devil.